Matt Fry on LBC.
Okay, let's turn our attention, as we often do, to events in the United States. Now, we know that Donald Trump has a lot of beef with a lot of media organizations. He tried to sue the New York Times. He is suing the Wall Street Journal. He did try and sue the ABC, but they settled. The same thing with CBS. Journalists and Trump, on the whole, do not get on very well. But what's never happened before until now is that a journalist was arrested for doing his job. I'm talking about Don Lemon. He's a former CNN, very well-known CNN anchorman. He now works for other organizations. He was arrested while covering some of the protests in Minnesota, charged with conspiring to deprive others of their civil rights. Now, in America itself, the arrest of Don Lemon has gone down with many like a lead balloon, and is, as we talk about whether America's sliding into authoritarianism, this will be, item number one, certainly this week. There are plenty of others. Let's speak to Simon Marks. Simon, tell us about Don Lemon.
Well, Matt, first of all, it's not just about Don Lemon, because he was one of two journalists arrested. There was also Georgia Fort, who is a respected and very active journalist in Minneapolis, who was arrested alongside with him. And to put it into even broader context, all of this comes 2 weeks after an unrelated FBI raid on the house of a Washington Post reporter. So the fear here obviously is that this is a much broader targeting of journalists than simply going after Mr. Lemon, who of course is nationally known as a result of his time previously as an anchor of CNN. Now, he and Georgia Fort were both covering a protest that saw demonstrators critical of President Trump's immigration policies enter a Baptist church in Minneapolis during services on a Sunday. The reporters were aware that the protesters were heading to that church. The church was being targeted by demonstrators because one of the pastors there also has a job with ICE, and therefore demonstrators viewed the church as services were taking place as a fair target for protest. Georgia Fort and Don Lemon were not protesting. They were there reporting the protests.
They were doing their job.
The Trump administration has argued that this was an invasion of the church, that somehow, therefore, can be construed as limiting the civil rights of worshippers inside the church. This, by the way, the same Trump administration that until yesterday, under intense pressure, would not expand the inquiry into the killing of Alex Pretty and the killing of Renee Good on the streets of Minneapolis by the Border Patrol and ICE, respectively, as possibly civil rights crimes. It was only yesterday that the Pretty investigation was expanded to include the possibility that his civil rights may indeed have been breached by the Border Patrol agents who killed him. But the threat here to working journalists, not just in Minneapolis, but all over the United States, is now very real and very significant. The authorities went to a court twice to get indictments against the journalists. Both efforts were rejected. It was only a third effort, when they impaneled a federal grand jury, that resulted in Mr. Lemon's arrest in Los Angeles on Thursday night, Friday morning. So the fear here is that this is now a really stepped up effort by Donald Trump to try and control the media.
Has he said anything about this? And is it personal for him? Because I do remember Donald Trump personally attacking Don Lemon, who's, very outspoken in his views against the president, and also during his first administration. Has he said anything about this? And do you think this might be personal beef?
I've not seen that he said anything about it, at least, I haven't seen today whether he said anything about it overnight, but he certainly hadn't said anything about it by the end of business yesterday. But the personal beef between President Trump and Don Lemon, I think, is absolutely evident. They have past history, and President Trump in the past has been extremely critical of Don Lemon. We've also seen, of course, over the last few days, that the Department of Justice and the FBI are increasingly being used by the White House as Donald Trump's tools of personal investigation and personal retribution. We saw that with the raid in Georgia on the election storage unit that took place in the middle of the week, and we've obviously seen it in a number of other cases where people considered by Donald Trump to be traitors have suddenly become targets of investigation by his Department of Justice and the FBI.
So this is getting quite serious, notch by notch.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, with every passing week, the threat to American democracy intensifies here. Whether it's the slaying of people, American citizens on the streets of Minneapolis who were not posing any threat to federal agents at the time when they were killed, whether it's the attacks on the media, whether it is real questions that are now being raised about Donald Trump's intent to try and mess with the midterm elections in November. And that, obviously has been heightened by the raid on the election headquarters in Fulton County, Georgia. All of that just adding to the sense here that democracy is increasingly on the line, and that this year, 2026, is going to prove to be a litmus test for whether American democracy can be preserved or whether it can simply be subsumed by a Trump administration determined to lay waste to this country's checks and balances.
Okay, two more brief issues. I mean, big issues, but brief ones, especially one of them. Bill Gates mentioned in the latest dump of Epstein files, I mean, in a really damaging way. Has it damaged him in terms of his public image? What's he said about it? Quickly.
Well, I think it's definitely very, very damaging for Bill Gates. I mean, there have been a whole series of disclosures already that were damaging for Mr. Gates. And this latest suggestion relating to medical treatment that he may have required, and there's no proof, of course, to support these allegations. The Gates team put out a vigorous critique of these claims and a denial of these claims within the last few hours. But of course, anything contained in those documents are relating to Bill Gates or other prominent figures are attracting attention here. And so I think it definitely tarnishes Bill Gates in the public's mind, whatever, in fact, the truth behind the allegations are.
Okay, and finally, the subject that we've all been waiting to talk about, the new movie, Melania, out in cinemas. Blasted by the critics, as you might expect. The president was there himself for the premiere. Have you seen it? Did you like it? Will you go and see it? Has anyone seen it?
I have not seen it, so I can't say whether I liked it or not. The president, by the way, has sat through two showings, one at the White House and then the other at what we must now apparently call the Trump Kennedy Center. Here in Washington, D.C., unlike in other parts of the country... He described it as a must-see. Twice he described it as a must-see. What a surprise. You can, I mean, here actually, I was surprised. I took a little scan of cinemas here in Washington, and maybe because this is Washington, there were theatres that had sold, a fair number of tickets. But, clearly you can walk into any movie theatre here that is showing it, and you will not be turned away. In other parts of the country, particularly in liberal-minded states, no one's going to see it. I am going to go and see it, and then I will report back to you.
And I will get back to you on that. And I think it was $40 million that Jeff Bezos paid for access to Melania Trump. We'll talk about that another day.